Members Bill C300. Can you tell me why C300 is so important to your union, Stephen?
Well, it's a bill that would regulate mining companies when they operate outside of Canada, generally in developing countries, and ensure that they were practicing good corporate social responsibility, and that in our opinion should go beyond what shareholders get, and more in favor of what stakeholders could get. That would be the country, the host country, the workers, the communities, the environment, all the other things that good corporate social responsibility envelop.
The problem, I take it, is that there's a big difference between how Canadian companies operate here in Canada and how they operate in other countries?
Yeah, some of the bigger, more responsible companies do a pretty good job overseas or outside of the country, but we maintain in Canada that they do a pretty good job here because we make them do it, and we negotiate good collective agreements with them and keep them more honest than sometimes they'd like to be, and that's what basically regulates them in this country. If they go into a country where there's no unions or it's weak, and governments are really relying on mining as a way to try to get out of some real bad economics, then we feel that they can really exploit the resource and in effect exploit the people and the environment in those countries.
What kind of situations are miners who work for some of these Canadian companies in other countries experiencing? What are the work situations that they're facing?
Well, they are oftentimes mistreated. When I talk about mistreated, workers in Chile and Peru, for example, work at high altitude mines, and we know in Canada, and so do mining companies know, that high altitude and high altitude sicknesses, there's some really profound long-term health effects, and up until now, Canadian mining companies just simply refuse to acknowledge that there's any bad health effects to working at altitude, and we know that's different, we know there's different information on that could really help these workers. Sometimes they interfere with the bargaining process, and there's a feeling about some workers in these countries that these workers are privileged. They call them privileged because they make more money than most, and they have real jobs. Does that make them privileged? Only in the eyes of the mining companies and some of the regulators or governments down there, and we're trying to raise the floor for those people as well, and in doing so pick up all the good things that we could export. I mean, we could export technology, we can also export good ethics and good social responsibility that we fight for in this country as well.
Now, here in Canada, there's one prominent strike going on by a foreign-owned mining company, Vale Inco, in Sudbury. How would the adoption of this legislation help the miners who are on strike in Sudbury, or would it?
Well, what we're trying to do is raise the floor. And I guess in some respects it's self-interest bargaining. If we raise the floor around the world for mining, then obviously it helps us domestically, because when companies like this start exploiting, and they've been doing it for as long as I've been in the mining industry, is if they start exploiting, they want to compare. And they want to say, well, we can produce this commodity, this exact same commodity in this country for this much less. So therefore, Canadian workers, you should expect less. Because if you don't, we're just going to turn a light switch off in Canada and operate wherever we can find the commodity. And that's the real issue here, is how do they control workers? And the way to do that is wages, benefits, and other costs. And costs in this case are, directly associated with Bill C300 share cost. What's the value of shares? And if we work to cost the companies a little bit more, we'd argue that in the long run it will really benefit the shareholders, because they have good corporate social responsibility, and it goes across the board for them. So they avoid a lot of, I think, conflict down the road.
Can you walk us through the history of this bill, a bit about the hearings that led to it, and tell us too about the politics of the bill on the Hill now? Who supports it and who opposes it?
Okay, well, on the last question first, who supports it? It's a private member's bill, and it's brought to us from the Liberal Party of Canada. It's supported by the Bloc and by the NDP. And so far, we're not getting very much support, if any, from the Conservative Party. And That doesn't surprise us. So they're fighting it on the Hill right now, and it's the genesis of this came from a series of roundtables held around the country where people were invited to speak on not Bill C300, but something that came before that on corporate social responsibility for mining companies or extractive industries in Canada. And many people took the time to come out and present and came up with lots of good ideas and lots of good suggestions. The government, for the most part, disregarded most of the input from the public and came up with some real loose guidelines for mining companies that basically say mining companies can regulate themselves, and we're not going to have any involvement. So go for it, mining companies. And C300 came as a result of that.
So the government's position then is self-regulation is the answer.
Yeah, the fox guard and the chicken house is basically where they're at. Yeah.
Is the are you encountering corporate lobbyists as you work on the Hill? Is there a heavy corporate lobby pushing against this?
Yes, there is. Some international trade lawyers are suggesting that we're trying to impose our laws in other countries, which we're not. There's some suggestions that mining companies won't invest in foreign countries if the long arm of the Canadian government gets to them there. But one of the I think unique things about this is oftentimes it's Canada Pension Plan. It's other investments from the Canadian government that support Canadian mining companies when they go into these different countries. And if we're putting an investment in, shouldn't we have a say as Canadians on how that investment is spent? And shouldn't we guarantee that people aren't being harmed in the environments, not being not harmed because of our investments? I think yes. That's the answer. Yes, we should.
Has Stephen Harper pronounced his opinions on this?
No, I have not heard that. No.
And is the Liberal caucus solid in support of this?
Now we're lobbying them right now as we speak, and it's always hard to tell with them, but we hope so. It is a Liberal-sponsored bill, but we're going to try to round them up this week. So we got people knocking on their doors asking them to support.
So theoretically, you ought to have the numbers.
We theoretically should have the numbers, yeah.
Very good. Well, what would you recommend that concerned Canadians could do?
Well, talk to your MP. Obviously, come out in support of this, and it is a good cause. And we think responsible mining companies, and most of them will benefit from this law. It's not something that is going to put anybody in trouble as long as they follow the laws. And the important thing about this is it is corporate social responsibility. So most of them are. So all you have to do is extend that. If they're corporately responsible and they have good social skills in Canada, then why not take those skills and export them? That'd be a good thing. We could be world leaders in what we do in the mining industry, and really show off as we should.